Alfredo, great to have you with us.
Hey, John, thank you very much. Always great to be on your show.
Hey, Alfredo, let me just start with, I want to start with the debt and then go from there. We're going to get the jobs in a minute. But the Associated Press reporting that when the fiscal year ends, this last fiscal year ends at the end of September. It's already ended. When the reports come out, we will have driven another $1 trillion in debt. That'll make our national debt $22 trillion, up $200 billion from last fiscal year. And, of course, the Democrats are going to jump on this and said, look, we said that a growing economy would get more money in and the deficit would decrease, yet it's increased. Now we got $22 trillion in national debt with no end in sight, and Washington in the swamp has no appetite to tackle this. What say you?
John, it's a really great issue. We obviously, on a longer-term basis, we're concerned about the debt issue. I mean, you can't keep taking on this kind of debt and not worry about it at a certain point. First and foremost, though, we know that the policies over the past couple, 2.5 years or so have been the right policies for this country. Look at the growth that we are experiencing from a GDP standpoint. Growth rate overall is just unbelievable. It's great. And it is expected to continue to be above 2% all the way through 2020. I mean, look at the latest unemployment numbers, for example, dropping from 3.7% to 3.5%. More people are working today than ever. We've got 1 million more jobs available than people are to fill them. I mean, overall, this is all thanks to President Trump's pro-growth policies, primarily and mostly the low red tape and the low taxes that we got from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. I mean, those two right there really would have been contributing to the growth of the U.S. economy. So we know those are the right policies to do, but the problem is we also still have a spending problem in D.C. And that's one that I know the president, wants to tackle, but, overall, both sides of the aisle, I think, just don't want to tackle it because they just want to keep kicking the can down. And, of course, the Democrats are even worse. Now they kind of basically are saying, hey, all these great social programs that we're talking about, the green, we call it the Green Raw Deal. They call it the Green New Deal, but we call it the Green Raw Deal. But things like that, Medicare for all, let's just go ahead and finance all of that through debt, right? They just believe that we can just keep on taking debt to finance these social programs. So that's why we're so concerned about this growing rise of socialism and what's happening to the Democratic Party, that rising tide of the left, because they are going to bankrupt our country. And people say, oh, this can never be Venezuela. Well, that's what the Venezuelans said 10 years ago when they were one of the richest countries in the world. Mm-hmm. And so we can't take our eye off the ball, John, and this is something that we are going to have to tackle. One thing that we're going to start pushing forward at Job Creators Network is a concept called basically a debt to GDP ratio, because we're not saying that we want to go debt-free, because I think there is some level of debt that every country can take on and can take on from a healthy perspective, but we just need to manage that within a debt to GDP ratio, and that's something we're going to be advocating for here in the very near future.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We are with Alfredo Ortiz, President and CEO of the Job Creators Network. Alfredo, you mentioned managing the debt to GDP ratio. What, in your view, is that ratio? What is the range where we're not at risk?
Yeah, you know what, John, we're still working on it. We want to kind of look across the country and use people who are a lot smarter than me to try to come up with that number, really. What is that healthy number overall? I mean, a lot of times, companies, for example, have that ratio also in terms of, their debt to revenue ratios. And so we want to be smart about it. We want to look at what is that healthy amount. So we're getting input from a couple of economists across the country to be able to get that, and then that will be incorporated in terms of our recommendation. But there is that healthy ratio. We know ratios, for example, like in Greece, those are not healthy ratios, right? And that's what we want to try to avoid. But again, there is some level of debt that is good for our country to be able to finance some of the stuff that we are doing and investing back in our country. But again, we still have to tackle some of the spending issues that we've got. And, unfortunately, we're going to have to tackle some of the hardest issues that, quite frankly, our politicians just don't want to tackle. For example, Social Security. What do we do there? I mean, one of the answers that the Democrats have is just to basically let's just keep raising the Social Security tax, right? Add another point or 2 points to it. Well, that's going to kill our small business owners, right? So how about we do other things that are a little bit more interesting from that perspective, that are a little bit more innovative, that actually don't look at raising taxes as the automatic default to every problem here in D.C.
Like what? Like, give me an example of what that might look
well,
like.
I mean, and people hate to say this, but, you look at the age, for example, in terms of, the retirement age. When Social Security started, I believe life expectancy was about 10, 12, 15 years less than it is today. And there still yet has been no adjustment in terms of that, So a lot of times folks are way outliving everything that they've put into their Social Security system. And so, we do need to look at that phase out potentially of raising that age, but something that's not going to impact anybody who is going to be eligible for Social Security in the very near future. There are ways of doing it, and there are gradual ways of doing it, but again, people have to have the stomach to do it and the courage to do it. And I know that's not too popular in D.C., though.
No, because the easiest thing is to raise taxes, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
and
well, they already... Yeah, exactly. I mean, the House already, Democrats have already introduced that bill. I believe it's Representative Larson has done that.
Right. Okay, let's get to, on Friday, the U.S. Department of Labor announced that 136,000 jobs were created in September, and the unemployment rate falling to 3.5%. Now, what is amazing is that if you did a take on the news like we do, the fake news, Alfredo, 95% of the stories on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday were about impeachment, Ukraine, whatever. 2% of them had anything to do with the fact that employment went down to 3.5%. And I was trying to explain what this means to people. We added another 136,000 jobs, all right? And for the first time, the unemployment rate actually went down. We kept adding jobs, and it kind of stayed around 3.8. And the reason is we kept adding new people coming into the job market that had given up. Now we're hiring ex-felons at a great clip. We're hiring handicapped people. People were hiring the chronic unemployed who are getting back into the job market. That's why you kept adding jobs, but the unemployment rate stayed the same. Now you add jobs, the unemployment rate goes down, Alfredo. Now the reason is we're at full employment, right? 3.5%. If you take Economics 101 as a senior in high school or a freshman in college, everybody's always said about 3.3 to 3.5 is just transitional unemployment. It's full employment in the United States. Yet the fake news media, not a word on it, Alfredo, not a word.
No, absolutely. I mean, John, this is the frustration, right? And thank goodness for shows like yourselves and others that actually enable folks like myself and our organization, Job Creators Network, to talk about the truth in terms of what's going on with the economy. Because otherwise, to your point, you'd never hear about it. They were so focused and have been focused on their 3 R's, like you call it, right? First, they try to take the whole Russia collusion on, right? That didn't work with the president. Then they try to do the racism card. That didn't work. Then they tried the recession card. Well, that's not really working because people just look around and go, recession? What recession? Every single restaurant that I go to, every dry cleaner, every single gas station, there's a help wanted sign everywhere, right? And so people are going, I'm just not believing it. So now they're trying a different letter, I guess. Now they're trying Ukraine. Now they're trying to use. And now we got to start thinking, what's going to go with you now, right? Because they're just going to keep on trying. I mean, look, they've been trying to impeach this president since day one. And we just wish that they would actually get back to things that are important to the people. For example, we've got the USMCA, United States, Canada, Mexico trade agreement that's sitting there in Pelosi's hands, and we need to move that along. I mean, if we can get that going, that could be another 1% to GDP growth. And if we're already kind of forecasting above 2% all the way through 2020, I mean, we could be looking at 3% GDP growth. But, they're not doing anything because they're just so focused on impeachment that's where their heads are. And, we're just not moving anything forward for the American public.
See, the problem is, Alfredo, if you're the Democrats, here's what you're looking at. Hispanic unemployment fell to a new record low. African-American unemployment remains at a record low. Wages continue to grow at more than 3% for the year, with blue-collar workers seeing the biggest gains, right? We had a 6.5% increase in wage growth since Trump took office. Last year alone, average families saw a wage increase increase of several $1,000s on average. I mean, that doesn't mean that, like you've said, we don't have some economic challenges, the debt and other things like that. But what you've got is this tremendous economy, and the Democrats' answer to it is, I hope there's going to be a recession. Let's raise the minimum wage and destroy the economy with a new Green Deal. They can't run on that. That's why they have to find something else.
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, they just can't, right? They can't run. Unfortunately, the good news of the economy is such an inconvenient truth for the Democrats, right? That's such the reality right now for them. So they're just taking on, making up stuff. I mean, you have, Schiff making up testimony, which is still unbelievable. I can't believe he wasn't at least reprimanded for doing what he did. But setting that aside, I mean, they don't want to talk about the great news of the economy, which I think is just incredibly unpatriotic, because rather than rooting for the U.S. economy, they're actually trying to talk the consumer into thinking that there is a recession. Fortunately, I think the U.S. consumer has seen this show before, and they're just not buying it. You're looking at consumer confidence is still strong, and look, when you do have record number of folks employed and these unemployment rates that we've got and wage growth that we have, I mean, that's why we're seeing, for example, amongst Hispanics, the approval rating for President Trump is over 50%, John, amongst Hispanics right now. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be the thing that's honestly going to change the election in 2020, and it's going to blow the minds of the Democrats away. That Wednesday morning when they wake up and they realize that they lost the election, right, and that President Trump got reelected, it's going to be because my prediction is that 40% of Hispanics voted for Donald Trump.
That is going to be, nobody's going to see that coming. They're not going to believe the polling as it is now. His approval rating has been consistently about 50% with Hispanics or over. We have a couple minutes. I want you to comment on the president last week signing an executive order to bolster Medicare Advantage and make it harder for Democrats to impose their Medicare for All scheme, which would clobber Medicare for our seniors. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, John, look, I mean, Medicare for All, first of all, we've said back since June, that was really a smokescreen, I think, overall for Democrats. They want to get to single payer. And frankly, I think where they want to hone in on is ultimately it's kind of more of the Biden plan. But this is all a Trojan horse. That Biden plan, which is basically allowing people to opt in and buy into Medicare, it's just another way of getting more people on the government payroll, more people on the government coverage so that we can ultimately get to a single payer. That's their wish. And the one thing that Democrats, as you know, John, they're very patient, and they are willing to play the long game on this one. And so this is a step towards single payer. That's what we are out there talking about in terms of our campaigns that we've got, our Socialism Takes, Capitalism Creates campaign. One of the main things we're talking about is Medicare for All and health care coverage, because right now, basically whatever they're going to try to implement, all it's really doing, it's making big medicine even bigger by introducing more bureaucrats, more lobbyists, and more politicians to the solution, rather than allowing the people to have the relationship and restore that relationship between patient and doctor. We're going to be advocating for that, John, over the next several months here and all the way into 2020, because we just fundamentally believe that policies like Medicare for All are bad for their country and bad for our American people, because it literally takes the doctor out of the equation, and we have to stop that from happening.
Where you guys, one more question, Alfredo. Where's the Job Creators Network on surprise billing? There's a number of proposals out there. One of them that we oppose is rate setting. Have you guys taken a position on that?
We don't like the idea of these hospital bills that come that are, these unexpected bills. We do think that's really tough on the American public. When you look at why they happen, there's a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of bureaucracy, John, layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy that add to these costs. And in some cases, we just have these, what I call obscene profits, frankly, that, whether it's hospitals and insurance companies, lobbyists, I mean, what they call the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers. I mean, some of these are just obscene profits, and the president, I think, knows that. He's acting on it. He's trying to act on the prescription drug coverage. But these surprise hospital bills and medical bills, it's really tough. I mean, imagine this, John. Imagine you walk into a restaurant and there are no prices on the menu. You order it, you get your bill, it's $50. You're like, hey, that's not too bad. I can handle that. You go home 2 weeks later, you get another bill from the restaurant, and that one's to cover the cook, it's to cover the waiter, it's to cover the busboy, it's to cover the garbage collection, right? And then all of a sudden, your $50 meal becomes $200 meal, right? And then the bills just keep coming from the restaurant. I mean, that would be outrageous. Yet this is what's happening in our healthcare system today. So I think, you got to push transparency. And one of the reasons, though, I think we are where we are is because competition fundamentally was removed mostly out of the system and is being removed out of the system because of Obamacare, right? And it has really created monopolies and oligopolies across the country in our healthcare system. And we need to do something to break that because this is a very tough issue for the American public. Elizabeth Warren has identified this issue. I know that. But the solution is where I think both, the parties really differ. Right, she wants to have, for example, and Democrats want to have more government intervention, right? More government intervention, more bureaucrats, more politicians in the say between you and your doctor. We believe it's competition, right? And we believe that fundamentally, this relationship between the patient and doctor is sacred and needs to be restored and maintained, and that's what we're going to be fighting for, John.
Well, thank you, Alfredo, and thanks for being with us today. Alfredo Ortiz, President and CEO of the Job Creators Network. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com, jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Alfredo, thanks for being with us. Always enjoy your perspective on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Eddie Urania.